Hello there, my name is James Baldwin and welcome to another episode of Extreme E's official podcast, Off Track. In this episode, we chat with apt Cupra driver Jutta Kleinschmidt. And I'm joined, as always, by my friend and yours. Yes, I'm doing it for the third time and I'm just going to reinforce it. It's Michael Laminato. G'day, mate.
The more you say it, the more it's true. So I think that's all right. We'll just keep saying it and it'll always work.
Not only that, mate, we're going to be travelling together very shortly for a very long period of time. So if it wasn't going to be the friendship beforehand, potentially it could go into dangerous waters. Yeah, exactly right. But of course, before we talk about the Jurassic X Pre, we had a wonderful chat with Jutta Kleinschmidt, of course, apt Cupra. Started off as one of the Joker drivers alongside Timo Scheider, and now, of course, promoted, as I said, into the role of apt Cupra, into one of the drivers. And she has such an amazing story, doesn't she?
What a legend. You know, I mean, there are a lot of legends. I don't know. I know this is the official podcast, and of course we're going to say that, but there are a lot of legends in the field. It's objectively true. And
yes,
she's one of them, one of the great ones. Only female driver to ever win the Dakar rally, which is incredible in itself. But what I really enjoyed hearing from her about in this chat is that when she originally got involved with Extreme E, it was on a concept level still. And she's just so enthusiastic, of course, about cross-country racing, because that's her thing, but that this is sort of like a bit of a vision into the future, if you like. You know, not everything is going to be Extreme E as a racing category, but this is a real step towards whatever the next thing in motorsport's going to be, and that really enlivened her interest. And she's clearly got a bit of a vision for what's going to happen in the future, I guess, not in a weird, like, telepathic way, where I mean she's thinking about it. And I just find that's really interesting. She's involved on so many different levels, engaged on so many different levels with where Extreme E is, and really great to chat to her about it.
Yes, incredibly passionate about the future, of course, and she has been one of the best and biggest names of certainly cross-country racing, but now motorsport as a whole for such a long time. A brilliant chat. Let's get into it with our chat with apt Cupra's Jutta Kleinschmidt.
Well, on the eve of the season finale, the Jurassic X Pre, it's a great pleasure to be joined from apt Cupra by Jutta Kleinschmidt. Jutta, how are you doing?
Very well, thank you.
Great to have you on the podcast. Now, we are on the eve of the last race of the season, so before we get into a little bit more about you, I just want to get a feeling of how you're feeling ahead of this last race. It's a little bit of an unknown. Of course, we didn't originally plan to go to the Jurassic X Pre. We do get the benefit of having a cool name for a race, Jurassic X Pre. How are you feeling about the last event?
Yes, I love dinosaurs. I'm looking forward to this one. I don't know if you see some, but it reminds me of the movie. Anyway, I'm very happy to go there. And yes, I'm really looking forward to the last race this year. And let's see what we expect. A lot of mud and rainy conditions, but maybe the sun is shining, so you never know. We will see.
Yes, well, we've seen a lot of footage coming out of Tanner Faust and Emma Gilmore driving the McLaren machine around, and it's looked very wet and very windy. So let's hope that it gets it all out of the way now, so it's perfectly dry by the time we're all there. You know, I'd like to go back to the very beginning if we could. We'll talk a little bit more about Extreme E, of course, in a little bit. But we are used to talking to drivers on this podcast and discovering that they've been, racing since 3 years old. They've been doing go-karts, or they've been doing off-road, or their parents have had some off-road rally school, which seems to be a key theme with some of the drivers I've actually noticed. But instead, you're a physics and engineering graduate. Was motorsport ever on your mind then, or was it just a coincidence that then you ended up working for a car manufacturer?
No, it was actually that I love motorbike, so when I was very little, I saw the bikes and I love it, but I couldn't afford one until I was 18. And because also of the driver license for sure. And in my family, unfortunately, nobody was involved in motorsport. So I bought my first bike when I was 18 and I started immediately to make adventure tours with it, so, and I loved off-road. And then actually I heard from the Dakar rally at this time, and I was so fascinated by this race that my biggest dream was actually to do this rally, but in the beginning only as a visitor. So I actually, paired up with a race and followed the whole rally with my bike, which I actually prepared by myself. And that was a crazy
Goodness.
thing to do, because at this time you wouldn't have any GPS or the satellite phone but I survived. And then when I was at the Lake Rose, my biggest dream was really to do this as a participant. And that's how it started. Very late, but not too late.
It's really interesting because often we hear, with races growing up, not only do they start sort of very young, as we said, but often there'll be a particular person they wanted to follow. Maybe they had a role model or something like that. But it sounds like you were much more interested in just the machines. Did you have a person that you sort of looked up to at the time? Or was it purely just, I guess, the adventure or the mechanics of it?
Yeah, it was a mixture of adventure. I love adventure. So this is the first thing. And I love technology. That's why I studied physics. And after, I love competition. So that was a good combination of everything. And I'm grown up with 3 sisters and my mom. So my dad left us very early. So we was only women in the household. And it was clear that we can do everything, what the guys also can do. So that's maybe what motivated me to follow my dreams.
And was there a particular, I guess, first memory? You had an interest in motorsport early on, but do you remember the first time maybe you saw that first bike that made that awaken in you? Was there a very first moment you knew this was going to be for you?
Yeah, there was one friend of my mother who came with a bike. And I was, I think, 6 or 7. And I saw this motorbike and I was fascinated. And I actually asked him if I can have a ride with him. And he agreed. And my mom was very angry for sure. But I was so fascinated by this and the speed. And I think that was a moment where I started to say, look, this is mega cool. And I want to do it myself.
We know plenty of people, and in fact, because you were working at BMW and were probably connected into that automotive world, you knew plenty of people too who wanted to be racers, be it on 4 or 2 wheels. You may tell us about the decision then to go, all right, I'm going to give up this and just go full send on that professional racing line and do it on 2 wheels.
Actually, that was a very strange period in my life, because for about, I would say, more than 6-7 months, I felt really not happy. I came actually back from the Dakar rally, and then I was already participating on a motorbike, private for sure, and in my free time, still working as an engineer. But I was not happy anymore. I thought, okay, that cannot be that I do this job until I'm old. And even if I had a very good position and I just had a trainee program behind me, which would put me in very good leader position in the company, but I wasn't, that was not my way. So I was sitting down and was thinking what I really want, and I wanted to race, and that's it. And and then I said, okay, let's give it a chance. If you really want to be better, you need more time and you need more training, which is super important. And then I said, okay, what can happen? You are a physics engineer, you have 7 years of experience in your profession. I will find a job again, So I quit my job and concentrated on racing. And it worked out at the end of the day.
Yes,
but it was not so easy.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, it makes it sound really easy. And I guess it worked out, and it was great. So, and it was. And that's the end of the podcast, everyone.
Yes, thanks so much for coming.
It's interesting because, so to make that decision, big decision first of all, but what was it like to then try and, I guess, break into the racing world to be taken seriously? Because not only have you arrived quite late, I guess, when we compare to people who might have been racing for their whole lives, someone who, okay, was around the sport, like you said, you went to Dakar as a follower, but was it difficult to be taken seriously in those early years as someone who wanted to start quite late, and especially as, I guess, was a theme for the rest of your career, breaking these barriers down, but a woman in what was a very male and still is a very male-dominated world?
Yeah, there's 2 things actually you have to fight with. In the beginning, for sure, everybody's happy you come. Cross-country is a big mix, so there's a lot of amateurs racing with professionals, so that is a good thing. But for sure, when you get better and better and start passing guys, then they're not so happy anymore. because it's like a shame, so especially at this time. Back now it's much better, but at this time it was a little bit like going home and the girl was faster, so that's what they don't like so much. And then for sure they fight even harder against you. But also this is in cross country not so bad, because you are more or less alone on the road, so we start in time difference, so you're not having this direct fight against each other. But later, when you are coming to a more professional status, it is getting difficult to get the best material, because then for sure they would think, okay, it's good to have a woman for PR because she's in the first 10 or first 5, but to really win, I believe more in our male driver, and then you're always a little bit the second driver in the team, and this jump is really difficult. And that's actually why I love Extreme E, because now we have 50% of female there. It's a very good mix, and everybody's helping each other, because otherwise you will not have success.
It is a really great story, of course, Extreme E. I'm interested, though, because after all that, it became, I know this is a little bit taking out the hard part in the middle, but we do the interesting parts, of course, the successful parts. But it seemed like you were pretty on the pace early on. Now, yes, you'd been on the bike for a long time non-competitively, so it wasn't as if you were completely new. But do you ever wonder why it was that you were relatively competitive quite quickly, where it seemed to come naturally to you? Or was it all just practice?
Yeah, when I started on bike, I think this is a mix. You have to practice. This is absolutely clear. And when I started, I did really things where everybody was laughing at me. I took my big BMW, it's a huge bike. In this time it was more than 200 kilo. And we had a training facility close to Munich where I lived, which was in a military area. But it was a little motocross course, I don't know, it was 2K or something like that, very small. And I was going there for hours, so always the same lap and just train the endurance and getting better. Because this was the only chance to do it on a frequent base. And for sure, the other guys with the cross bikes, they was laughing at me a little bit, but they also liked me in a way, so this crazy young girl. But it's a mix. But for sure, I think you need also a kind of, let's say talent for it. You must like it. But I think if you do something what you really want to do, and if you love it, then you're normally also good in it. But for sure, it needs training too, both.
Of course, we know that you've had experience in the Dakar world by just following it around. Before we get into, of course, talking about how successful you became in Dakar, I'm really interested in what it was like the first time you went out and were just following the teams around. Can you talk us through, was there any support given to you, or did you just rock up at the end of each day and go, hello, I'm here again?
It was both, actually. When I went there with my bike and not being in script in the race, in this time it was really different, because you had to go off-road and there was no road. If you're now in Saudi Arabia, the Dakar, you have assistance roads and everything, but this time was pure off-road, and you had to go very often the racetrack, because this was the only connection to the next biwak. So in the beginning, you don't know many people, but then I start to know the people, the teams, and you talk to people, you get contacts. And then for sure I was telling them, look, if I'm not arriving next day, please organize that somebody is looking for me. And I also got petrol from them, because they always had leftovers. And this time they ordered all the petrol in the middle of the desert. And then the car teams, for sure, they order much more than they need, because they don't know exactly how much they will use. So I always had the petrol for free, and then for sure I had the food for free. It was not as today with the pass and all this. So because anyway there was no visitors, and so it was a very cheap holiday actually.
Cheap and exceptionally dangerous holiday. I love it.
Yes.
Yeah. Good tip. It's a good travel tip. I like it a lot.
Yeah.
So what was it like then to transition to doing the first year competitively on the bike? Because, there is the adventure element, of course, that's always part of Dakar, and it's part of what makes it such a great spectacle. But when you've decided you're going to do it competitively. Talk us through that first competitive Dakar event, because you didn't end up making it to the end as well, I guess. So emotionally, there's that challenge in Dakar too, isn't there?
Yeah, it is actually a big step because, when I was at the Lake Rose, when I followed the rally only and I saw all my heroes arriving, only 30% of the competitors arrived at the lake, and wow, they was all heroes for me. And suddenly I decided to do this by myself, and I was so afraid. And I thought I will be the only one who cannot drive up the first dune, and all the press will be there and make pictures, and everybody in the world will know it. And so you have this kind of thoughts that you fail, and which is clear, especially when you are doing something new. But you have to learn. What I did, I had no mechanic, I had nothing. I had only a box with some spare parts. And I put this box on a truck, and this truck was lost already after 2 days. So then I was completely alone. And then I was on top of it very unlucky in my first participation, because there was a super difficult stage, and 80 bikers didn't make it to the finish in one day from more than 200 bikes. And I just arrived in the finish. I think it was 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning, and stopped at the petrol station, which was not a petrol station, was a track in the middle of the desert, only for the bikes, to give you some petrol to make the road section. And they gave me diesel. Yeah. So I didn't really take attention. And then for sure I continue. And then the diesel, came into my engine, and the engine didn't really like it. And I had to push back my bike, which was a long procedure, because I drove already, I would say 2K. And then actually I cleaned everything, and I could make the road section, but I came 30 minutes too late to the start of the next day, and I was disqualified. So this was really, really bad, because all my money I had was gone. I was completely bankrupt after this participation. It took me 3 years to try my second time, earning money.
You clearly
getting
wanted,
better.
Yeah, well, you clearly wanted that,
that,
right? Yeah, you gotta then go and get some cash to restock the bank to then put it all in again. And of course, we know that your success came on 4 wheels, and we know in a contemporary sense, of course, Laya Sands, who also races in Extreme E, has done something very similar. But talk to us about your experience. What was it like from the switch between bikes to cars? It's obviously a completely different discipline, even just on basic off-road and track stuff, let alone doing the Dakar. What was your motivation behind it? And were you surprised that, yet again, here you were being immediately competitive?
Yeah, the thing is, I had done everything on bike, what I thought I want to do. And I was looking for a new challenge. And I saw these cool cars, yeah. And I thought, I think this is the future. I have to manage to drive one of these cars. And that is the most difficult step, because a bike is affordable, yeah, but a car is really expensive. You need 10 times the budget of a bike. So, but luckily I had already a quite good name on the bike, and I already had some sponsors, and I managed to convince them to finance my first participation in car. And then I took actually a standard car, which was in a marathon class, they called it. I was not allowed to change parts. And I finished in the first 10 with this car, which gave me the possibility to find more budget and to buy myself into the next team and so on. So until I was in the best car, So I even paid when I won the Dakar Rally, I still paid for it. Let's say my sponsors paid for it, So it is a principle. You have to find the budget, and then you buy yourself into a team. And if you find more, you can get in a better car, and hopefully one time you're in a winning car.
And you can definitely see that trajectory up to 2001. And I do want to, of course, talk about 2001 now, because it was 3rd and 5th in the previous 2 years. So you could see that it was getting close. You can never really predict the outcomes of cross-country racing, can you? Sometimes it just appears towards the end. You can see who's going to win all of a sudden. But how did you feel going into that year? Did you have a sense that could have been your year, or do you not even think about that stuff?
No, because I actually thought my aim was to finish on the podium. And I tell you why, because I had not a factory car. I had the client car, which was quite different to the factory car. We had, for example, 200 kilo more, and not the last spec of the technology. So, and there was 4 factory drivers, and for sure other teams too. Yeah, so about 4 factory drivers from Mitsubishi. And there was this client. We was 3 or 4 clients. And anyhow, I thought if I finish third, that is the best you can do. I was not expecting to win. And but the circumstance was on my side. Sometimes it's like this. And then the 2 first guys, I was on the third, very good position until the last 2 days. And I was very happy to be on this third position, very close to the 2 other cars, but I couldn't expect to gain this time or win, because they was very good and in better cars. So I was happy with my third place. And then the other 2 start to fight, and suddenly they made mistakes. And finally, I was in the position to profit from this, and I won. So that was amazing, So, and I remember the last day, because I was so nervous, because I was only 2 minutes and I think 59 seconds in front of Hiroshi, who was second with a Mitsubishi factory car. And then actually they started to build the tire pressure system out of my car. Yeah. So we had a tire pressure system where we could inflate and deflate the tires when you are in sand and dunes, and that helps a lot. You have much more grip with less pressure, and the risk to get stuck is very little when you use it. But they said, because you have not a factory car and your car will go back to Germany, we have to build that out, because we don't want that somebody steals this technology. So they built that out just before the last day, So can you imagine how nervous you are then? And I didn't sleep the whole night. But the last stage was around the Lake Rose. That's why I love the Lake Rose. And I gave all on one card, and I thought I will win this. And I even was faster than Hiroshi without my tire pressure system, and I won it. So that was a great moment, and I will never forget.
I mean, the nerves of that day, I was going to ask you, what were the nerves like that day? But the setup to that story is, it is incredible. No sleep the night before, and then to go in feeling like you're at disadvantage. What was it like in the last hour of that stage then? Because you must have known roughly by then, the very end of that stage, you'd probably done enough. Obviously, the car had survived, which is good. What's it like when you can feel that it's close? I waited until the finish line, to be honest, because I know everything can happen. You can even roll in the last hole, and it's finished, especially when you have only 2 minutes and some seconds ahead of the second. So, but when I crossed the finish line, I was quite sure I have it, because I had a really good drive, and you're feeling that. But I was not 100% sure, because Hiroshi was not there still. So I had to wait until he passed the finish line, and looking on my watch, if it's enough, because his starting time. And it was enough, and I know for sure it was a huge release, because that's the biggest dream you have, to win this race, and when you see where you start from, on a private bike, building it by yourself without any mechanic. And then several years later, you are there and winning in a car. This is unbelievable. So it was really a big thing for me.
Hello friends, I'm Cristina Gutierrez.
Sebastian Loeb.
Jamie Chadwick.
I'm Leia San.
And I'm really excited to
be a part of the
3-week Countess-In Challenge.
This challenge invites all of us to take
one of 16 simple steps
in our own lives to have a positive impact on the planet.
These steps are a powerful way to have a direct impact on carbon pollution.
It's very easy to do. All you have to do
is take one of the 16 easy steps
that fits best for you.
When you take a step with my team, you'll be supporting us
to top the leaderboard.
The more fans we have doing the challenge, the more likely we are to win.
I've decided to take the step of walking and cycling more.
I'm going to drive electric.
I'm going to commit to eat seasonal food.
Alongside trying to eat more plant-based foods.
Use a green energy provider to power my home.
I'm going to walk and cycle more.
So take a step and talk about it.
And then take another.
Because I want the future to be a better place.
Can we count you in?
We'll get back to our chat with Jutta Kleinschmidt in just a moment, but you heard there the video for Extreme E for Count Us In, the Count Us In challenge, and you've probably been seeing this on the coverage as well over the last couple of rounds. It's, I guess, almost like the end game, if you like, of the whole environmental challenge side of Extreme E, because it's partly bringing attention to, of course, the challenges of climate change, and we have the legacy program as well, naturally enough, that's making real world differences in the places we travel to. But this is where it all comes home, because it's not a free ride, James. You don't just get to watch Extreme E and think, oh, yeah, it's pretty good. Guess I'm doing my bit. You got to put the knowledge into practice here, and this is a way to not only add, I guess, an element of competition to it, because everyone loves to be competitive, but to keep track of yourself, to make yourself accountable in a way that will help you to, I guess, evolve your behaviors to be more climate conscious.
Yeah, absolutely right. And as we've said a few times on this podcast, and indeed there's been comments going around as well, it's not all about the big business, the big end of town, the politicians. The real change can start right now, today. And certainly as a result of this series, we've heard from the Extreme E scientists about the bigger impacts and, of course, steps that we can do at home. But there's some real easy steps that we can do straight away. And the Count Us In project, I think, is an incredibly important part for everyone to play along with at home. As you said, it is absolutely a competition as well. And of course, you can jump onto the Extreme E Count Us In page and check out who's leading. The hot tip is it's X44 at the moment. It's with Rosberg X Racing in third. It's X44, JBXE, and then Rosberg X Racing. So JBXE, just as they always are, hanging around that podium position for a bit of a surprise. But one of the things that I thought we should have a bit of a talk about is what the steps are that you can take, and something that potentially either one of us has already started doing at home, especially ahead of the final race in the Jurassic X Prix. Now, there's 16 steps. We won't go through all of them, but the first couple are really, important, but big effort, let's just say. And the first of those, of course, is driving electric. And I don't know about you, Michael, but I think an Odyssey 21 would look exceptional in my driveway.
You need a big enough one.
I couldn't take it out of the driveway, but certainly it would be good to look at. I'm not sure maybe that's the best step to take straight away. But of course, there are other steps to take as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, that is on the higher end of the scale. Not everyone's immediately in the market for buying a new vehicle, which is, it's pretty. It's no wonder it's rated as the most effective and largest step. So you can get rewarded if you do.
Yes.
You got 2 months as well. Once you sign up to it, you have 2 months to make it come true. So maybe if you want to buy one, but you're sort of like you need to be put over the line, make the Count Us In challenge convince you over the next 2 months that you're going to get it done. Maybe it's a great motivator. I don't know. But there are plenty more, let's say, consumer level and I think really useful challenges, because there's a lot of really everyday life kind of stuff, like let's say use less plastic, for example.
Yes.
It's a really great I don't want to say entry level, but it's a very achievable goal and really ties in nicely if we throw our minds back to the race in Senegal, which was all about, or at least partly about, the fact we were seeing a lot of rubbish washing up on the shore there. And it sort of asks you to evaluate how much plastic you're using, what kind of plastic it is, and then just make a commitment over the next 2 months to find ways to reduce that level of plastic. And when you really start to think about it, for example, if you're going to the shops, you're often offered plastic bags for your fruit and vegetables, for example, or maybe your fruit and vegetables are for whatever reason already wrapped up in plastic for you to take. Seems a little bit redundant, but if you can then actively think to reduce those purchases or purchase things that are not wrapped in plastic, you'll be surprised how quickly you can make a difference. Sometimes it is, and we've talked about this before, haven't we, that there's almost there's an overwhelmingness. That's a good word, isn't it? Professional podcaster. To the whole climate change challenge. But sometimes you do need something like this, which is essentially a checkbox exercise in the best possible way. It's offering you checkboxes to check of things you can do that will make a difference. And then once you do one or two of them, of course, the third one you can do is tell your friends, which is, that creates exponential difference. If everyone tells one or two people and they'll tell one or two people, all of a sudden, that's a lot of people cutting down their plastic or reducing their bottled water purchases and all that kind of stuff. It makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I definitely think the conversation is the biggest one that is so easy to do. And certainly I think now just the shape of everything in the world, that it's an easier conversation to have had even since beginning of this year. And when Extreme E was invented, designed, that whole thought process, as we said to Alejandro, this shouldn't even really exist as a series. Very glad that it does, of course. But having these conversations at home, and it might just be as simple as, have you actually watched Extreme E yet? Because, of course, in part of the broadcast package, we, as the podcast is part of that, but as looking on the television broadcast, there's parts of it that we go to and we see the different scientists like Carlos Duarte, of course, who we've spoken to on this podcast as well, give incredible talks and understanding in such an easy to learn and understand way as well about those bigger impacts. And we're getting to go to such amazing places. You said Senegal. And of course, another step is drink tap water, not bottled water. And of course, there's plenty of ways that you can do that in your daily life. But this whole Arctic Express thing, I think for me personally was the biggest eye-opener. Of course, we haven't seen professional sport there at this size in Greenland before, but to see those different the ice caps where they've shifted to in terms of glaciers, seeing Sarah Price camping on a glacier and Kyle Leduc and their understanding, the rainfall that had happened there as well. Pretty outstanding. So that's probably a great place to start, is check out at least the Extreme E broadcast, or have a listen to this podcast as well. We're always happy for you to share this around, of course, but look, it's well worth going to count us in. So search Extreme E Count Us In. We'll pop a link in the description below so you can take some steps to act on the climate challenge that is before us today.
Absolutely. It is crucial that we all take action, and people power is possible to change the world. I know it sounds like something from a 90s movie about, I don't know, a local council dispute, but it is true. Now is the time to do it. Now is the time to convince companies, to convince politicians. We're on that precipice. We can all play a part. So search for it, Extreme E, Count Us In. But for now, let's get back to our chat with Jutta Kleinschmidt.
Let's fast forward a little bit now, Jutta, to Extreme E, because obviously this is the Extreme E podcast. Always ideal to talk about it, as I always say. Now, you're the president of the FIA Cross Country Commission, and you first got involved with XE as an advisor and a championship driver. And as we said just before we started recording, when we interviewed Timo Scheider, of course, you were the co-Joker driver, the championship driver. We would love to have spoken to you then. You've since had a promotion, which is fantastic, and we get to talk to you now. But it's an absolute mixture of all of these different types of competition. What was it like getting involved right at the beginning? What was the pitch?
For me, when I heard about Extreme E, I wanted already to be involved. And very early, I talked already with Alexandro and say, look, this is a fantastic series. This is what we need. And it's cross country. Yeah, for me, it's cross country, and it was also it's also run under cross country in a way. And I liked the idea. And then a little bit later, they came with the idea to make 50% girls and 50% boys, or women and men. And then I was even more in love, because I thought that is exactly what we need. And and so I was pushing to be involved, actually, and they was happy to have me. And so that's why we find a position, which was in the end of the day the championship driver and advisor. I have to say the main work is done by Timo. He always went to the locations and made the racetrack, and I came only to a week before, and then we would test drive it and maybe make some small changes here and there, and also to see if the battery and the temperatures are okay for the race. And I loved it to be involved and in the middle of all these champions, because I think this is a series where you see the most champions from all kinds of disciplines. It's unbelievable, and it's a nice mix, and I think it's good to have this, because this is what I think we have to go this route. And that even in cross country from next year on, we have new regulation to involve the electric cars. For sure, not only with battery, but with range extender or fuel cell. So I think this is the way where we have to go to have motorsport in the future.
Did you think when you got involved that driving on a full-term basis was going to end up being part of it? Because obviously the championship driver meant you were an emergency, and that ultimately came to pass, funnily enough, in Senegal, in Lac Rose, which is a beautiful symmetry. But was this ever on the horizon, the idea you might become a full-time driver here?
Actually not, because I thought this chance is very, very, very little. So because normally the drivers are there and they are also healthy. Okay, with COVID it could be, but then you also know it maybe before and not at the last moment at the race. So this chance was actually very little, and I didn't really expect it. But on the other hand, I knew it can happen,
Absolutely. And it did happen, as we said, in Senegal for the team, of course, now for Ab Cooper. And it happened in a sudden way, didn't it? It was just before qualifying. What was that like? You obviously had experience of the car. You knew the track a little bit because you'd been doing the work beforehand, as you said. But suddenly, again, you're back in competition. It's very sudden. You've still got to adjust to the way the team works, the way Matthias works as well, I suppose. Qualified third, so very good. But what was that day like? Because it must have been hectic.
Yeah, it was, because jumping in the car, even if you know the other car, the cars are different, in setup and all this stuff. And yeah, for sure, it was special. But on the other hand, I loved the sand and the Lake Rose. So that was good for me to know that this kind of off-road, I'm used to it. So it's not such a big surprise. So for sure, I was super nervous, but I was more nervous to because I didn't know where I will end up, So because if you don't race for such a long time in a high competition level, you don't know if you are too slow or whatever. And so that for sure, I was a little bit afraid. And but luckily, it was okay. So so it was fun, and it was fun to work with the team. I already in the first race, I learned a lot from Matthias, because what we never did in cross country is actually work so much with data. But because the track is so short, you have to do that, because you really have to be on the point in each little jump and corner. In cross country, this is a little bit different. We go out there and have 500 kilometers in front of us. So if you miss a corner or a jump, it's not so much dramatic. And also the style is a little bit different. You wouldn't attack so much, because you wouldn't survive a race of 2 or 3 weeks. And so you really have to go a very, very high speed in extreme heat to be at the pace, because the other do it. And if you're not doing it, you're behind.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're obviously in Senegal. It's very close, as we've said, to the how good it was for you back in 2001. And it was unfortunate that Claudia was ill, so you managed to do that. It was fantastic. But then, did you ever think while you were driving around at any point that, gee, maybe I should get a little bit more comfortable with this car and comfortable with the idea that I might be racing at the Arctic X-Prix and Ireland and then Jurassic X-Prix as well, and understanding how it works on completely different terrains? Because I know that Timo Scheider would absolutely love for someone to lose their hotel key in the male camp so he can get a drive in. In fact, he even said that on the podcast, that he's happy to lock somebody in just in case, But what was it like? Did you feel at home in the car sort of after the qualifying session and you settled down into the race?
Absolutely. And the team helped me a lot. It's very nice to be in the Ab Cooper team, because they're so professional and so helpful and always, how you say that, friendly, and I love it, and it's nice to work there. And actually, when I had the chance to continue, I was extremely happy, and for sure, I talked also to Claudia, but I think Claudia was also in a kind of happy, because she had some problems with BMW anyway. She's working full time there, and they actually wasn't so happy about that. And so I think for everybody, it was a good decision to continue. And for me, to be honest, I was extremely happy that I have the chance.
And as you said before, you're teammates with Matthias Ekström, who's absolutely incredible DTM championship. He's a rallycross ace. We've said it before in our race review episodes that he is incredibly intelligent when it comes to the strategy of the race and where to put the car at different areas. And sometimes, shedding weight maybe where other teams haven't done, in the fact of a door flying off here or there. What was it like for that sort of team sport mentality? Because you've said that the team has helped you absolutely, and Abt Cooper have been fantastic, but the whole idea of then sharing the car, doing the crossover period as well, of course, which is incredibly important, that only very short window to get one driver out and one driver back into the car. It's almost... Sometimes I suppose you have to get some compromise going on in terms of whether seat position or other bits and pieces. Despite both of you being well experienced, though, and especially probably for the Arctic X Prix because you settled into the role a little bit further then, are you still able to learn from each other?
Yeah, so I think I learned more from Matthias than he from me, because he is really used to this kind of short racing and analyzing everything. And so he's helping there a lot. So I think I learn a lot. And especially also what we never have done in cross country is visiting the track, and visually. So that's a little bit difficult for me. But I'm learning here, and so that is very important, that you get all the support and advice how to do it in the best way, and to look for the right line, which is super, super important. And so also analyze where you lose time, where you can gain time. And I think this is very, very professional and completely new to me. Because in cross country, 500k, you are not comparing, So, and also you wouldn't provide so much out of it because you are not driving the truck again. Here you're driving it again, even if you don't drive it very often, and that's what makes it so difficult. You have maximum 5 laps, if you make it to the final, and one track walk, and so this is difficult. And but it's also fun because it's challenging, and I love challenges.
Yeah, and you're a trailblazer as well, aren't you? I mean, it's something that I love about Extreme E is that it doesn't matter how old you are or what gen you are, you can be incredibly fast and be incredibly important to the overall picture. And you are a trailblazer for your rivals when it comes to being in this sport too. Cristina Gutierrez, of course, and Leia Sanz, who I mentioned before, who have both completed at Dakar and have done amazing things as well. You've held boot camps in which they have been there, and you're mentoring a lot of young women who are driving and rising through the ranks. But surely when you put that helmet on, all of that goes out of the window and it's, get out of the way, here I come.
Yeah, for sure. If you put the helmet on, you want to be fast, and then the friendship ends in a way. But if you're out of the car, the friendship is there again. So, no, I'm very proud that 3 of my girls from my selection camp, which we did, are in Extreme E, which is Molly, which is Christina, and now Emma. And that is fantastic. And to be honest, that was the 3 best of my camp. They are now here. And that makes me proud too, because I really hope we will have more women, which we can see already. If you see the next Dakar, Molly is driving, Christina for sure, she always did, but Molly is coming new to the Dakar now. So it is very, very good that we have many of these women who are in Extreme E driving other races now also, just to get more practice too, because we have a lot of male champion there. Yeah, they're all world champion or whatever, but there's not one who's not a champion. And they are driving the whole year many series. Yeah, so Matthias drove 4 series this year, for example, which is he's only in the car. Yeah, and so they have a lot of chances to practice, and the girls still have less. So I think it's important that they have the chance also to drive in other series and getting more practice, because in Extreme E, the car goes immediately on the boat, and that's it. So only this time we had the car, but then their car went into the shop and was dismantled for the next season. And then you have no chance to train with the car in between the races.
It's funny that you bring up Molly, and I think it's fantastic, of course, that announcement that she's going to Dakar for next year, incredibly good. And one of the things that I think Extreme E certainly has done is bring a lot more attention onto these fantastic female drivers to be able to get them hopefully sponsorships and drives and awareness. And as you said, I mean, of course, once the helmet goes on and the friendship goes out of the window, but once it's off again, this sport seems to be the most, or the paddock that just gets along the best. There doesn't seem to be any, even the last time around there was an accident and a car got parked into a bush, there was still a lot of goodwill going on after maybe the initial kinds of conversations. Is that a little odd for you to see all of these different people from all these different parts of the motorsport world, of course, behind the scenes as well as drivers? Once the racing finishes, they're all just getting on incredibly well and understand that they're here for that bigger purpose of that awareness of sustainability and climate change and diversity.
It is actually very, very nice, and I love it very much because you can go to everybody in the service park, and we really have even sometimes some parties after the race together where we have a lot of fun. So I think this is incredible, and really, I cannot see much jealousy between the drivers. For sure, everybody tried to do the best, and everybody want to win. Otherwise, we wouldn't be drivers. But I think this is incredible. You're absolutely right, and it's not normal.
Let's talk a little bit now about that. As you said, it's incredibly important, that Extreme E, that gender parity. When we're looking at these new drivers coming through, these young drivers, and it almost doesn't really matter in terms of gender. This is just the new normal, as it should be anyway, in terms of these heroes that you all are, and trying to show young people across the world that motorsport is a possible career for them, specifically women, of course, in your case. How important is that for the next decade of motorsport? Because this really feels like it's the turning point now where this, as I said, should be the normal.
Yeah, I think this is super important. And when I came to be the president of the Cross Country Commission 3 years ago, that was my first step. We had to find a possibility for young people to join motorsport. And then we invented this SSV category, which is our T4. And then motorsport was affordable, because this is the main problem. People want to do motorsport, but it must be affordable. And then for sure, the next step, it must be definitely also environment friendly. Otherwise, we will not continue. And I think here, in the moment, we can see that we have a lot of, especially young new girls, which was for sure already champions in their discipline, but maybe not as well known as champions we have in the male category. So I think it's important that they get this PR and now the chance to find a budget to go into other series too. So I love it, and I can see it in cross country. We have so many more girls now. I think the next Dakar we have in total, I just started to count it up, but it's around 15 women driving and co-driving. So I think this is fantastic.
And of course, that the gender issue is something that is fantastically being challenged and, as I said, moved on. But we're coming out of COP26, of course, and the bigger environment challenge now is ahead of us. With your role as president of the FIA Cross Country Commission we've spoken about just before, how important is Extreme E then as this beacon of what needs to be done? As Michael has put to Alejandro in our last episode, Extreme E shouldn't really have to exist, but it does. And one of the core functions is because of this climate change and the issues that we've got. We've seen plenty of sports like rallycross, of course, moving to electric now. There's Moto E. The Formula E, of course, has been around for a while now. Extreme E as well. From that cross-country point of view, though, the sustainability issue is a big one, and you don't want to be damaging the local environment whilst you're there. Do you think it's going to be a big challenge to overcome in the next couple of years with that? Or do you think that there's this momentum now that Formula E started with Alejandro, now of course this idea with Extreme E, and the whole push now towards more renewables and that better behavior, I suppose, when it comes to how we treat the world that we live in? Is that an easier sell for those industries and these racing categories that have been doing this for many, many years without thinking like that?
I think it's absolutely necessary. Otherwise, we will not have the support from manufacturers and we will not have the support from the sponsors. And you can see that they want it. Because if you see Formula E, I think it's still the series with the most manufacturers involved. And Extreme E is growing. And next year we will have McLaren as a new team, which is fantastic. And in the sport which I am making the regulation, also together with the FIA, is actually very important that we have this, we call it T1 Ultimate, which is for cars who are environment friendly. We involved more technologies, so not only battery electric, but like I said, fuel cell cars, range extender. But with the Audi, we have the first car now who race in the Dakar 2022. We have a lot of fuel cell projects, even also for trucks. And we can see the interest of manufacturers here is big. Yeah. So now we have the regulation. Now they can be involved. We also will use the first time sustainable fuel in the next Dakar for quite a lot of top teams already, which is definitely extremely important. So if you don't do that, I think the sport will not survive. And we are on the right direction, and therefore I think there's a great future in front of us if we continue to use technologies who are environment friendly and for sure being sustainable. And we have to take care about our planet, and that the motorsport has to do the same. That's clear. Anyway, we did a lot of innovations the last 3 years. So we are now at a point where everything will be implemented in 2022. First thing was also to have a world championship. We have from 2022 on cross country, which we call Rally Raid World Championship. The Dakar is the first run of this new championship. And that is already very special because FIA has for the moment 6 and we will be the 7th. Then we have implemented nearly every regulation new. Like I said, we have one entry level now, which is super important to get the young pilots. Like you could see in cross country, we was missing young talents because they would love to do it, but it was not affordable. So we have solved that problem. The next Dakar is completely full. This was not the case the last, 15 years until I stopped. And so I think that's already incredible and shows the interest. We have manufacturers who are interested in our new technology group, which is for sustainable electric cars or fuel cell cars. And we have invented a truck regulation too, which was not existing at the FIA for prototypes. So also here we can see sustainable trucks with hybrids and fuel cell projects for 2023. So I think we have done nearly everything what we need to do to make this sport big again. And the result already with the entries for the next Dakar prove that we are on the right direction, and also having new manufacturers in, especially also this little side-by-side group, which is exploding. Yeah, so I think half of the field is driving there now. We have a lot of young talents there. Red Bull is there actually with a team with Christina for new talents. And so I think we are really on a very good step in the moment. And like I said already, we are using for the first time sustainable fuel. This is biofuel generation 2 or 3, which is not made out of food, which is super important. And so I think a lot of changes are there. And now we are on the starting point for the next season to see everything.
Of course, with Extreme E, it's not all about the racing, although the racing is bloody fantastic to watch, of course. There is this legacy project, which is incredibly important in each of the areas that we have gone to, and of course going to now in the UK as well for the Jurassic Expo in a couple of weeks' time. But for your significant travels as a racer, and also not as a racer as well, but following a race, has traveling with Extreme E, especially the last couple of races, and witnessing these sites, and I can only imagine in Kangerlussuaq with Greenland was incredibly awesome in the true sense of the word, to see just how far that glacier has gone back from where we were 50 years ago. What is it like for you, changing that sort of perception, if there was a perception of what climate change was, and how you then perform in day-to-day life going on from that, and how you talk about climate change with people that you know?
You know, this is something who's really special because, and maybe this is also the point why we work so well together, all the pilots. I never had that in my long career in motorsport, that you have even events together before the event where you make aware of a climate problem and see it yourself. Because this really changed something in you, because you see it in the television, but seeing it yourself is even more important. And to make aware of this, because after when you see that, you are really an ambassador for that, because then you know it's very, very important. And that is really very special. And I like this part very much, because we take the time. It's whole day before the race, and we only concentrate on that. And I think this is fantastic, because you don't have this. Normally you go to a racetrack and then you race and you go home. Yeah, and most of the time you didn't even see something except the racetrack. And so that is fantastic, and open our eyes. So that's clear. You don't
have to be a little bit cheeky, and thank you so much for your time. It's so brilliant to have you not only on the podcast but involved with the sport. But I've got to be cheeky and ask you this question. Of course, Abt Cooper is going to finish on the top step, but if you were to take second and third, who do you think will do that and then win the inaugural championship for Extreme E in 2021?
This is a good question. So you want, for sure, we want to be under the 3-2. I always say that on the podium. That's clear.
Yep.
But you know, the last races show it's crazy. So you never know who win at the end of the day. Yep. First, you have to make it in the final. We saw that twice. Even if we had good performance, we didn't made it to the final. Last race, luckily, we made it in the final, and then we had a little bit of luck. And the others didn't had it, which was the case before to us. So I think it's really crazy, and everything can happen. For me, for sure, Molly and Christina. They are already in a very good position to be in the first three. And let's see who is catching the last position on this podium for the total classification in 2021.
Such a fantastic answer. It's a non-committal answer, just like Alejandro gave. I'll get it out of someone before the race when we get to the Jurassic Expo. Well, Jutta Kleinschmidt, fantastic, as I said, to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much for being here. We wish you well, of course, for the final round and everything that you end up doing in 2022.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
Great to chat with Jutta Kleinschmidt from Abt Cooper. And of course, she's looking forward to a race in only a week or so's time. I had to think then. Yes. It feels like it creeps up on you, don't they, these races? They really creep up on you.
Yes. And it's going to be a great race as well. As I said right at the very end, who did you think was going to win? I kept asking all of our guests this question. And she gave a sufficiently politically correct answer in that, of course, Abt Cooper would win the race. Fair enough, too. In the second and third positions. Who knows? But, of course, with Molly and Christina there as well, of course, part of her junior program at one point or another, and of course that mentoring role that she's had for so many of these female drivers. It's just so great. Although I do love that she's like, yeah, put the helmet on, friendship out the window.
Yeah. Well, it's the way it's got to be, isn't it? It's just the way it has to be. But it is so interesting because it just highlights, as we sort of have with some of the people we've been chatting to so far, but I thought this really tied it together nicely, that there is such a broad range of races involved in Extreme E. They're all competitive, but they're all here for a good reason. They all want to make a difference and try to get that message across, the good environmental message. And not only are we seeing people from different disciplines, but also different generations really all competing against one another just to make a difference and also win the thing. Of course they want to win the thing.
That is the ideal situation. And the Jurassic X Prix is going to be very, very good. We've also seen some footage at the track courtesy of the McLaren XE team. They've been doing some testing, of course, with Emma Gilmore and Tanner Faust. That's been really great too. And they've had some wonderful content being put out, as McLaren so often do. But of course, there was a bit of testing going on, I should say, by Tanner in what is effectively the 2022 Odyssey, which I imagine is then the Odyssey 22 rather than the Odyssey 21. I could be wrong about that.
Still COVID-19, James. So who knows?
Yeah, good point. But in terms of how it looks, it's interesting. And these massive water splashes, as I said, massive jumps as well, because it is Bovington, a tank proving ground, a tank testing area. I can only, just visualizing in my mind, Timo Scheider standing at the top of one of these big things, clapping his hands together and rubbing together going, oh, this is going to be good.
He must be absolutely pumped, really, because it is, it is almost, I will be interested to talk to him about it, but it almost feels like the most blank canvas he has, because it is a testing ground. It's not like it's a particularly sensitive or whatever environmental area. It's like, no, this is specifically designed to test things and break things. So it feels like very much up his alley.
Yes, absolutely. And look, we get to be there as well. That's a little bit of a hot tip as well. We'll be doing some great digital content, so make sure you keep your eyes peeled on Extreme E's YouTube channel. If you haven't yet gone and subscribed to that, please do that now. We would love to have you over there. But before we get to the very end of this podcast, Michael, just a quick shout out to JJ O'Stanley, who left us a review. He's from the UK. He's 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. He says, "Energize your systems. Always a great listen. Both James and Michael are extremely wise," and that's the end of the note. "And knowledgeable on all motorsport and great at providing incredibly insightful information into Extreme E. The guests, pasts and presents, are amazing with the projects and an understanding of them as well. Always a great laugh, engaging, and feels like some friends chatting over a drink. By far my favourite podcast, and always catch myself unconsciously refreshing to see if a new one has come out. Keep up the great work." Well, mate, thank you so much for that. And thank you to you too for listening wherever you're listening. It's been great to see, of course, those who listen to Spotify and the Spotify Wrapped as well, seeing the Extreme E podcast pop up on those lists as well. But Michael, we are under 2 weeks away from the Jurassic X Prix. I'm going to ask you this question because I've asked everyone else. Who do you think? Who's your pick?
I just hope they all have a good time. And if you see a T-Rex, don't move. It's vision acuity is based on movement. It's going to be tight, isn't it? It's going to be exciting. It is a championship finale. This is not just the next race. It is the finale of what's been a hotly contested championship. A lot of teams and drivers still with something to prove, having felt like they haven't had a clean run through what is admittedly a relatively short season, so it's hard to get one. I just can't wait to see what's going to happen, but it is the default answer. You'd love to have a points lead, wouldn't you? So I'm going to tip the favourite, if I have to, and say
tip the Australian, why don't you?
X Racing. Yeah,
there you go. It's default. By default, we're just biased in that direction. But of course, it's all to come. As I mentioned, we'll be over doing some great digital stuff on the YouTube channel. So make sure you subscribed to Extreme E on YouTube and all of their socials, as well as we said halfway through the episode. Make sure you check out at least Count Us In. You can just search Extreme E, Count Us In, or look at the description below for the link. But it is time to say goodbye. And Michael, I will see you in person. Well, I'll see you on the way as well, but at the Jurassic X Prix in Dorset.
See you soon.